to another edition of the Loose Cannons podcast, quarantine style, as we're hanging out here on Zoom. I'm hanging out with my boy Stank and a special guest from theathletic.com, the one and only Greg Auman. How you doing, bro?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man.
I'm starstruck. I've never been nervous on the show before, but I am right now. It's Greg Auman. We've got effing Greg Auman on the show.
Oh, stop.
Yeah, I mean, if you want like fair and actually like interactive Tampa Bay Buccaneer news and information, dude, Greg's the guy to follow on Twitter. I mean, he's witty and he knows his shit. So that makes it even more worth your while. So you should definitely check him out on Twitter. Greg, you've covered the Bucs for a while. Can you remember an off season that has as much hype and excitement and activity and just the flurry that this Tom Brady and the Super Bowl being in Tampa? Do you remember an offseason even close to this?
No, I mean, I was lucky enough to kind of cover the postseason run there with the Super Bowl, and that's the only other thing I would even think of that's close to this. You try and think about the biggest offseason splashes and additions they've made, and it's like Deshaun Jackson or something like that. There's not much that is even close to this. So, yeah, in terms of excitement, in terms of relevance, getting people across the country interested about the Bucs, Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski do it in a way that nobody else – I'm not even sure what I'd point to as second best since the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is the whole Gruden hiring.
Yeah, I guess that was big. Yes, true. And that, I mean, again, it's one of those where it's big, and obviously it yielded a Super Bowl in year one, but it's still just a coach,
Right,
still,
exactly.
In terms of an on-field personnel move, it's really big. I mean, this is, again, in terms of people that know nothing about football know who Tom Brady is. There are grandmas and grandpas that watch 2 games a year, but they can tell you that Tom Brady wins Super Bowls for the Patriots. So I think in terms of casual interest, ramping that up, TV ratings way up. We'll see it in attendance. We'll see it in ticket prices. We've already seen it in national primetime games all over the place. This is just – and it's big. It's big just in terms of pure football too, but everything else around the team is big too.
Did you think that Tom was going to come to Tampa? Did you ever actually fathom it being a reality?
No. In fact, I'm surprised I haven't been hit by more people that messaged me in January and February, because I would say politely dismissive of anyone that said, "Hey man, Bucs gonna get Tom Brady." Because first of all, I didn't think he was leaving New England, and if he did, wasn't really sure why he would pick Tampa Bay. So even when this was kind of a thing where you went to in Indianapolis is where Bruce kind of said Tom Brady is, in terms of you think about end of February, the dynamic is still should the Bucs franchise Jameis Winston? Should they even risk him going to the open market by not franchising him at $27 million a year? And even then, when he said the first call would be Tom Brady, and it's yeah, but I'm pretty sure Patriots are going to work something out. He's been there 20 years. He's been in 9 Super Bowls. They're going to work something out. So once he put out that message that he wasn't going to be back with the Patriots, then it became very real in a hurry, because I thought Tennessee might be the biggest competition, and kind of fortunately for Tampa, they were very loyal to Ryan Tannehill as a guy that got them to the AFC Championship game and paid him a lot to keep him. That was the team I kind of thought, he knows Mike Vrabel much better than he knows anybody in Tampa. So, yeah, it's completely – it grew on you pretty quick in terms of, wow, this could happen, but even March 1, it seemed very unlikely.
Dude, I thought –
don't feel bad. I was going to say.
I thought for sure that it wasn't going to happen. We were definitely not thinking it was going to happen. And I was like, if the Bucs were even on the table, they would still be the third option. I was thinking that if he decided not to go back to New England, it would be either Tennessee or the Chargers, just because of his ties to LA. And then, like you said, his ties to the Titans, and they're basically just need a quarterback. And I feel they made a stupid decision by paying Tannehill, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I thought it's one of those where, Tom Brady's as big as it gets. So if he left, I was thinking, you got the Chargers moving into a new stadium, trying to shoehorn in for every bit of the fan base they want in Los Angeles. So you'd think they'd want a really big splash. And it looks like maybe logistically he just didn't want to go to the West Coast. So that kind of was an easy way to take them out of the short list, if you will. Even Vegas. I mean, like Vegas, was trying to make a splash in a new city, in a new stadium where you want to do everything right. I wondered if they just cut ties Derek Carr, trade him, get a better quarterback, get the biggest possible draw. Vegas, you go get the absolute headliner when you're in Vegas. And that's what I thought they might do. So again, it's great for the Bucs, for anyone around the Bucs. There's a whole new level of interest that you can't manufacture. So, I mean, it's been great to see it happen, and he hasn't played a game yet. So at this point, you just kind of hope, for a lot of reasons, that they're able to play a season this year and things can come together on the field.
Yeah, so many other scenarios made more sense. The first being him going back to New England. I mean, I tweeted out that I would become celibate for a year if he became our quarterback. That's a nice way of putting it. And, and I actually – I still can't believe that all those dominoes fell into place. I mean, you go back to the Titans sneaking into the playoffs and, Tannehill's reemergence into the league. Like, if those things don't happen, he probably does go to Tennessee. It made way more sense for him to go there. But the fact they decided to give Tannehill money, and I'm assuming that was part of the discussions, at least. Wasn't there that video of them at the basketball game, him and Edelman, and they had Mike Vrabel on
right.
What is it, FaceTime or something like that?
Yeah.
Which I thought, this is all crazy. He's still going to go back to New England. None of it made any sense to me. It's still kind of surreal that Brady's here, that Gronk decided to come out of retirement to be here. So how many days before the official announcement did you know, before you could say anything official?
Oh, not at all. I mean, we did, like I said, I came back from Indy, and it felt like, you're always, anytime there's like that just scuttlebutt that's out there where lots of people are talking about something, you don't know if it's going to happen, but it becomes such a conversation point to where you're like, all right, let me at least explain what the Bucs selling points would be. What would be the things that they would tell Tom Brady? What would be the reasons that he would choose here? And we put that out, I want to say that was maybe like March 2nd or something like that, where it was like, okay, they have a coach who has a great history with top-tier quarterbacks, and that would mean something to Tom Brady. They have elite offensive weapons in a way he hasn't known in years. So if I'm 42 and I'm trying something new, choosing to go out into something unfamiliar, I want to make my job as easy as possible. And being able to throw to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin would carry a lot of weight toward that. And that you get two great 1,000-yard receivers, complement each other, good tight ends. This is before Gronk was even in the picture. Those are the things that made sense. But again, he has almost no history with Tampa. It's not like he has the nostalgia of winning a Super Bowl here. He only played here once. He barely won in that game. So it's just, you don't know what his vibe for the city is even. And like I said, it's one of those where, Tennessee sticks with Tannehill. That takes them off the table. Chargers are too far from home, too far from everything he knows on the East Coast. That kind of puts them at a disadvantage. And things go well, with initial meetings with, phone calls with Bruce and with Jason Light. And there they go. They get him. And it wasn't even that expensive. $25 million. I mean, like I said, most Bucs fans were willing to give Jameis more than that.
Yeah.
And I mean, even though Brady's 42, going to be 43, he's still Tom Brady. So you have to like the value in getting him for $25 million, given what some quarterbacks are making these days.
When it all happened, what was, like, from a fan's perspective, there's a whirlwind that we go through. Information gets, thrown out there, and all of a sudden these things just start falling one by one. From a media guy's perspective, like, how crazy was it when it actually came through that, okay, this is actually going to happen? And then the craziness of having to do the press conferences with the Zoom calls and all of that stuff. Like, how crazy was that whirlwind for a guy from your perspective?
Yeah, it's as big as you can get. And again, it was so surreal because so much of this happened really at the very start of isolation and working from home and social distancing and stuff. So wherein normally, announcing Tom Brady as your new quarterback would be the biggest presser you can do, right? I mean, you can't fill the room completely enough. There aren't enough places for cameras in the back of the room. You're lucky to get a question in. And instead it's a conference call, which is like what we usually do with like a 7th round pick. So
he was a 7th round pick, so
it was a 6th round pick. So yeah, it's one of those where
6th round pick. Sorry.
Yeah, so that made it all the more surreal. Again, like we haven't met Tom Brady in person yet, and he's been on board. It's almost two months now. So it's strange. Everything about this has been strange, just because everything in our lives have been strange for the last 2 months. But yeah, even as it happened, there was that really like, is this really like, is something, there's going to be a trap door and he's going to change his mind and go back to New England, right? Like, is it signed? No, they said he signed. All right, he signed. Okay, he signed it. It's happened. Okay. And even then, you're just kind of, really?
Yeah.
What's it? Listen, you're in the media. You're surrounded by, NFL players and coaches and owners, and you go and meet and greet, everybody we see from afar on ESPN. But there's got to be a part of you that's excited to be covering Tom Brady. I'm watching this Michael Jordan documentary, and really you can only compare Brady to the GOATs of other leagues, and you see how obsessed Jordan was with winning. And then you watch like Tom versus Time, and you see the same characteristics coming from Tom. I mean, it's almost a sickness for the guy. He's just obsessed with winning and working hard and making those around him better. What's it going to be like for you to be in a locker room, to have a microphone in his face, to get to know him maybe, on a personal level and have a laugh with him, after the lights are off and the mics are off? That's got to be a cool thing. Yeah,
it's wild. I mean, it's kind of the opposite of what I've known. I mean, honestly, it's one of those where, I've lived in Tampa 20 years. My kids have all been born and raised here. So I don't really want to move at all. So it's rough in that for my job, for the most part, I've covered a team that hasn't been very good, that hasn't had a lot of interest beyond its market. The only playoff game I've covered in person was a Jags game back in 2017 where I drove up to Jacksonville. So that's fine. I like where I am. It's like you kind of deal with the team that you cover. But this is the opposite. This is a huge level of interest in everything he does. I can't write enough Tom Brady stories. We've already seen, again, Tom Brady walks into the wrong guy's house. It's a story. Tom Brady gets bumped, kicked out of a city park. It's a story. Golf, again, right now I'm trying to figure out if I can get over to Hobie Sound in 2 weeks to cover Tom Brady, who's golfing with Peyton Manning and Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson. So these are all new things, covering the team. But no, it's fun. All you can do is try and do the best job of it, try and talk to the people that have covered Tom and figure out what the best way to do things are and start off on the right foot. Read a bunch of Tom Brady books, read a bunch of Patriot books, feel like you get to know him at least. So you know all the background. When he makes a reference to something from 2004, you want to know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I never even thought about that kind of angle. Like from a reporter standpoint or a journalist standpoint, you have to like do some research, I guess. When this season finally does happen, if it does happen, I'm holding hope that it does.
Right.
What do you think this team will look like with Tom Brady as the quarterback, as opposed to all those other guys that you've covered since you've been a Buck reporter?
Yeah, this team's never had a superstar. You think about as a franchise. The best players in Bucs history, even going back to the Super Bowl years, are defensive players. Are guys. If Derrick Brooks walks into a restaurant in New York City in his prime, I don't know if people know who Derrick Brooks is. Warren Sapp probably a little bit more identifiable just because he was such a personality and you saw him on TV a lot. But this is, I would say that about maybe 3/4 of the teams in the NFL. They just don't have anybody that is at Tom Brady's level. I think we would talk about Jameis Winston being the face of the franchise, and he absolutely was. That's kind of that default. Well, your starting quarterback is a number 1 overall pick. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's well known. He's the face of the franchise. It's almost by default. Even right now, you think about the biggest well-known names in this league right now in terms of the Aaron Rodgers and guys that are younger like Pat Mahomes and all these types. I don't think they have – they always talk about Q rating, like how many people know who Tom Brady is. I don't think there's probably anybody in the 4 sports right now. Maybe you'd say LeBron James probably has a stronger – everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows his story. Nobody in hockey right now. Even a guy like Mike Trout in baseball is pretty unknown, hasn't had the postseason success. Tom Brady's got 6 rings. He's been in 9 Super Bowls, So there's just a whole level of literal celebrity status that he has and brings to Tampa and elevates Tampa just because he's here.
Yeah, you're going to be working alongside the likes of TMZ now in the locker room. who are going to follow him around, follow him to Jeter's house, and report, like you said, on anything and everything that occurs. So back to what Samer pointed out. From an X's and O's standpoint, I mean, do you see, and I know a lot has been made, are they going to build this offense around Tom? Are they going to do things that fits Tom better? I mean, do you see Bruce changing his stripes significantly and allowing Tom to kind of run the show?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a pride aspect of like offensive philosophy and like this is how things are done best. But you added Tom Brady. I mean, you added the most successful, winningest quarterback we have in the NFL in this current, active players, this generation. You'd be silly not to cater what you do well to what he does well. So, I mean, I think with any team, you'd do that. If they brought in Teddy Bridgewater, you'd want to do it to some extent, but especially for Tom Brady, for somebody who's 42, I think it's that much more important that you protect him. I think part of him being safer than Jameis Winston is just that he's really good as having an internal clock and knowing to throw the ball away and knowing not to hold on to it too long and all those things. I don't know that I think of the Patriots offensive line as being that much better than the Bucs this past year. And Brady had 19 fewer sacks than Jameis Winston. They only had I think the difference in total passes was 10. So it's the first thing I want is the Bucs threw the ball a lot more than, not really. They didn't. The difference is 10 passes total, but 19 fewer sacks. So I think they'll be better about protecting him. I think you have to recognize that Tom Brady has done a great job of throwing to tight ends and running backs as a dump off, as a flare out of the backfield. He's had at least 100 receptions by running backs 3 years in a row. So that's going to be more prominent. I would have said they were throwing to the tight end more before they added Rob Gronkowski. So especially now that Gronk is here, I think they'll do that more. And I don't know that they throw less to the receivers because Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still elite receivers. They're still going to throw to those two. Maybe the third receiver isn't as crucial in this offense as you saw with Deshaun Jackson and Adam Humphries and even Brashad Perriman last year. So like I said, I think they'll change it. Scotty Miller will be right there. But again, whether it's Scotty Miller or Tyler Johnson or Justin Watson, I think the second tight end is probably going to be a bigger deal than the third receiver this year.
What is your opinion on – there's a lot of people that put a lot of weight on his production as it relates to Tom Brady over the last few years in terms of the types of passes he throws, shorter passes, passes that don't really utilize a down the field type of threat. How much of that do you think is Tom, and how much of that do you think is simply not having the weapons to do the opposite of that? And as opposed, so it's more Tom adapting to what he has, and his ability now coming to Tampa allows him to take a different approach with the passes that he would be able to, take shots down the field, things of that nature, things that more or less fit what Mike Evans is more, suited to handle as a wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, his last year in New England, I think his numbers did drop off. And I think, on a larger sense, they've dropped off probably the last 3 years. But 2018, you kind of had Gronk hurt for the most part. 2019, you had no Gronk. They really didn't replace him at tight end very well at all. You look at receiver, they had a number 1 draft pick that barely played till the end of the season. They had, brought in Antonio Brown. That didn't work. I don't think he ever had less talent to throw to than he had this past year in New England. So he goes from that situation to what he has in Tampa, where, again, it looks like it's probably some of the best talent he's ever had to throw to. I think that will help his numbers in itself. I think you have to expect some kind of drop-off just because he's going to be 43 years old. There's never been a 43-year-old full-time starting quarterback in the NFL. There's only one quarterback that started a game and thrown a touchdown at that age. Just one. There's only one that's ever started a game and won at that age. So everything he does is unprecedented, but most everything he did last year was unprecedented for a 42-year-old. He had twice as many yards as any 42-year-old last year, twice as many touchdowns as any 42-year-old. So I think you just have to hope that there's that normal decline, and it's kind of, hold on this way. It's kind of going like this and not like this.
Not so much a cliff.
Right, yeah. If this is just a light decline, if he's 10% who he was in 2018, 10% less, I should say, you take that and you're happy to have that. So, that's what you have to look at is just there'll be a drop-off because he's at an age where he should be dropping off. But, he's kept his body in remarkable shape Injury-wise, he hasn't missed a game due to injury since 2008. I'm not sure who else you could really point to in the NFL that has that kind of run going. I mean, the only times he hasn't played is when he got suspended, and he can control that pretty well. So yeah, I think there'll be a drop-off, but I think he can still. If all he does, someone was asking earlier about projections for this year. He's not going to throw for 5,000 yards. I don't think they want him to throw for 5,000 yards. But if he throws for 4,200, if he comes close on the touchdowns, if he goes 30 touchdowns. The biggest difference he's going to make is if he throws 10 picks, if he throws 8 picks instead of 30, that's huge. I mean, that's 20 more possessions that you were able to at least keep the ball going down the field. And if you score on half of those or a third of those, that's a huge difference as opposed to all the picks that went the other way, all the short fields. He'll help his defense just by doing that as well.
Do you think the Bucs have built this team in a way that will require him to not have to be so much of a Michael Jordan type of figure in terms of his numbers, where he's not so much needed to be super Tom Brady, just be good at what you do, make smart decisions, and, considering what they've done in the draft, do you feel that they've added the necessary pieces around him now to allow him to kind of be more of a comfortable addition and not have to do so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything about this is new for Tom Brady. I mean, he won a Super Bowl his first year in New England, and ever since then, there's been super high expectations where anything less than a Super Bowl is a disappointment. I think they've won their division like 13 years in a row. So, I mean, he knows nothing but – right. So, I mean, he knows nothing but not only being in the playoffs, but being at home in the playoffs. So, you have this wild dichotomy where let's say the Bucs go 10-6 and are a wild card in the playoffs, that's a wild disappointment for him. That's something he hasn't to deal with. I don't think he's dealt with that since like 2008. But it's also the best the Bucs have done in that same time frame. So it's, in one hand, it's way worse than anything he's used to, and way better than anything the Bucs have done. And it's weird to balance those two things, because we can sit here and say, what would make a success for the Bucs this year? And it's like, 10 wins, 11 wins. He doesn't even think that way. He's thinking, how many playoff games can he win? And that's what measures his success. So if all the Bucs do is take on his expectations and say, wow, okay, we're going to evaluate this season as a success or a failure based on what we do in January, that's completely different from anything I've covered here, anything this team has known in 12 years, 13 years. So like I said, it'll change. It'll be much different for him. We say how good he is at home, okay? But this home stadium is a whole new thing for him. He's only played in that stadium once. So all the comfort, all the familiarity, all the confidence that came with being at home, he doesn't have that now. Just because you say it's your home stadium doesn't mean it's the same advantage as what he had in New England and in Foxborough. So
yeah, I laugh when you say home field advantage in Raymond James Stadium, because we don't have a home field advantage, and we haven't since our Super Bowl run. Greg, let me kind of, the Jameis versus Brady debate rages on constantly. It just doesn't leave the discussion, especially on Twitter and throughout the fan base. A lot of people are going to, if we do have success, we'll say, well, we surrounded Brady with what he needed, and the defense played better, and they're going to come up with excuses of why Brady is going to be able to be successful and Jameis wasn't. Can you kind of put to bed or give me your opinion on the whole transition, the thought process of moving on from Jameis and adding a guy like Brady? What's your personal opinion on why they decided to do that?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think it's something that I think most teams would do if they had the chance, especially a team that struggled with turnovers the way the Bucs did. So, I mean, we had this offseason, and it's like all of last year, throughout the year when we'd ask about Jameis, it was surprising and impressive how much Bruce Arians defended Jameis Winston almost all year long. He'd say, like, you can't make that many mistakes, but I mean, he'd throw other players under the bus. He'd say that pick was really more on the receiver. That, on that play, Peyton Barber's supposed to be 2 yards deeper than he is. It's not often that coaches actively mitigate criticism of a quarterback. So he was very much all in on Jameis from the beginning. Talked about how it was a reason he got the job. I can remember, like, when Cutter got fired, I was a little bit surprised that Light was up front and saying, Jameis Winston is our guy. Like, whoever comes into this job, Jameis is going to be his starter. And I kind of wondered, like, does that limit you in terms of who wants to take the job? Because maybe you like the idea of coming to Tampa Bay, but Jameis Winston got suspended the year before, still had thrown a decent amount of picks. Maybe that guy wants to bring in his own quarterback. And they were like, no, if anything, we think Jameis Winston is the selling point. When Bruce came in, again, it's like this is a reason why he took the job, was the chance to work with Jameis Winston. And that really didn't change until the very end of the year. I mean, you think about that end of game presser after the pick six against Atlanta week 17. That's when Bruce said, there's some things that are good. There's some things that are outright terrible. And it's like, wow, that's not a word you hear a lot about coaches with a quarterback they intend to move forward from. And then, it kind of continued in Indy. That's where, in Indianapolis at the Combine, Bruce said, like, he's still an unknown quantity to me. And, like, NFL teams don't write $25 million checks for unknown quantities. Like, you better know what you're getting if you're spending that much money. So they had certainly telegraphed those things. And Bruce, again, to his credit, is a very honest, transparent, open guy. But I don't know that there's a narrative that goes around right now where it's like, they put a first-round draft pick into a tackle. And it's like, wow, I didn't do that for Jameis Winston. Now,
right.
So I think there's definitely some people that's like, any success the Bucs have, it'll be because Tom Brady didn't have some of the things that Jameis didn't have. Not because Tom Brady's better or Jameis is worse. The Bucs put a lot into their offensive line. They didn't put high draft picks, but the instant they drafted Winston, their next two picks were offensive linemen that they kept and started and cultivated, and then paid them both more than $10 million a year to keep them here in Tampa. 2 years ago, they signed Ryan Jensen and made him the highest paid center in football to protect Jameis Winston. So even though it wasn't a number one draft pick, and it probably should have been, it's not like they neglected the offense. It's like, they draft two running backs, and it's like, well, now Tom Brady's going to have the running game that Jameis Winston never had. But they put a second-round pick into Ronald Jones 2 years ago. They wanted to have a running game. They gave Doug Martin $35 million because they wanted to have a running game. It's just those guys didn't work out immediately the way they should have or they wanted to. So I think the idea that any success the Bucs have will be because they did things differently under Brady than they did with Winston is a little bit short-sighted. They've really added very little. You think about free agency, if anything, they've gone out of their way to surround Brady with the same people that Jameis had. You look at the additions they made. Gronkowski is different, and obviously that's $10 million they're putting into a tight end. But Joe Haig is the next highest free agent that they've gotten in this spring in this spending. And instead, they're putting money into keeping Shaq Barrett and keeping Ndamukong Suh and keeping Jason Pierre-Paul and keeping all the supporting cast. I think it's like 11 or 12 guys they've re-signed. So if anything, at least by quantity, they've tried to surround their quarterback with the same things they did last year and hope that Tom Brady is the difference, as opposed to doing things totally different for one guy that they didn't do for another.
Well put. Samer?
I was gonna say I never really thought of it that way, but it's literally they're thinking we're just one player different right now, and I think that's what will make the difference. So they went ahead and did that, and the majority. At least Christian Stank and I, we were against Tom coming to the Bucs because I just didn't see an ego like Bruce willing to collaborate and accommodate another player who probably doesn't fit on paper exactly into the system that he likes to run. So I just didn't think it was going to work out that way. But he's here now, and the Bucs are clearly all in. Do you see a glaring weakness or an issue that they maybe haven't yet addressed, or do you feel like in this offseason so far, and mostly through the draft, they've pretty much shored up, any of these weak links that maybe, we've had over the last few years, Jameis or no Jameis?
Yeah, no, I think they've definitely filled most of the holes. I think going into the draft, we would have said right tackle, and they certainly answered that with Tristan Wirfs. I think pass catching running back is something they talked about, and I think Keyshawn Vaughn will complement Ronald Jones. I don't know whether Ray Colley will be a part of that or not, but they drafted two running backs. They put a third rounder into a running back, so that certainly answers that. Safety, I don't know that I really had Safety was probably the position I knew the least about in terms of how much they liked what they had. Like for me, I was always struck by the fact that, like, you think about the second half of this past season, when everything clicked and everything was going right, they still were starting Andrew Adams at safety. And Andrew Adams is like a league minimum, got him off the street guy that played well, but probably isn't a long-term answer. So for him to be ahead of Mike Edwards, yeah, I mean, you feel like, okay, that's not elite level play. So that was a position where I thought they could upgrade, because I think safety is a position that is really, really important in Todd Bowles' defense, just having a versatile guy that can do a lot of different things. And it could still be that Mike Edwards is one of those guys, but I think they're really like Antoine Winfield. So I think that's another area that they upgraded. The only spots I would say they've neglected or haven't addressed yet, they definitely don't have an outside linebacker to be a third pass rusher the way Carl Nassib was. And again, they're going to lean hard on Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul, but if either of those guys get hurt, it's a big drop-off all of a sudden. I mean, even if they really like Anthony Nelson a lot, he's got less than 10 tackles in his career. So to suddenly be counting on him to play, I mean, if one of those guys gets hurt, he's playing 70, 80% of the defensive snaps. He's never encountered that in the NFL. So it makes a lot of sense that they still will have, at some point here between now and training camp, that they'll probably have like a veteran, whether it's a Clay Matthews or somebody else that's not, they're not going to add a Pro Bowler here, but they're going to add somebody who's done it and is proven and can add some experience to the depth they have at outside linebacker. I still kind of wonder if they are okay with everybody they have at corner. I think they could add, I think they like their top three corners very much, and they'll be totally happy rolling out week one with Davis and Dean outside and Murphy Bunting in the slot. But if one of those guys get hurt, it's back to like Ryan Smith right now. So I do think it would make sense to add a veteran, somebody who knows this defense and can help out inside or out, just so you have a guy that can step in if somebody gets hurt. And those are the weak spots right now. It's just depth and shoring things up there. But if you look at Bruce's history, he's pretty good about finding those spots. It's like interior offensive line, okay? Like they don't have anybody with much experience, even like Earl Watford level experience at center or guard. So they could add somebody there between now and camp that just knows the system, has been in the league 6-8 years, and can be a better drop-off. So if Ryan Jensen gets hurt or Alex Kappa gets hurt, they have somebody they can plug in and have it be a more known commodity. That's all.
You think DeMar Dotson and Earl Watford are guys that could potentially find their way back onto the roster?
Earl Watford maybe
in a depth role.
Yeah, Dotson, I really don't think so, because it's like they've already. Once they signed Joe Haig, once they drafted Tristan Wirfs, those are your top three tackles now with Donovan Smith. So, if you wanted to bring Dot back for depth, to have a veteran room, you could, but they have a lot of guys with experience. They don't really need that. And it's, you feel bad for Dot because, Dot's still unsigned and it's mid-May. All he's ever known is playing for the Bucs. He had the longest run of anybody in that locker room, but right now it looks like they've moved on from him. They just signed Josh Wells, and Josh Wells is, again, another, if he's your fourth tackle, I don't think they would have gone through the trouble of signing Josh Wells if they had any intention of signing DeMar Dotson. Watford makes more sense. Watford's a guy that can give you depth all across the line. Again, would be cheap. He's probably going to be a league minimum guy again wherever he goes. So you could sign him without having to commit a whole lot financially. It just depends. If they really like the depth they have with the young guys they have, like Aaron Stinney and Zach Shackelford and some of these rookies they have, it might be they're okay going with that. But right now there's just not a lot of experience at guard or center if anybody goes down.
Watford and Haig are basically the same in terms of they're able to play multiple positions, which is, right. I think their approach is let's get a couple guys that can maybe plug and play different spots in case there is an injury, and just kind of have everyone, ready at any moment just to take up in any one of those spots. As it relates to the draft, did you have a favorite player that the Bucs picked up this past draft? Everyone's obviously excited that we picked up the right tackle. We need a right tackle, but the general consensus on our show, at least, is that Winfield is the guy that we are just most excited about. Is there a guy that the Bucs picked up in the draft that you're more excited about than maybe the general public would be?
Yeah, I feel like excitement usually with the draft goes with who you know the most, like who you knew before their name was picked. I got really lucky. I covered the Outback Bowl this year. Like the Athletics Minnesota writer couldn't come down. So they asked if I could fill in for the Outback Bowl. And I did it just thinking, okay, cover a ball game, get some coconut shrimp, that kind of stuff. And I had no idea I'd be covering 2 future draft picks. So I kind of had prepped for that game thinking I was going to write Antoine Winfield because he had so many picks and it looked like this might be his last game. I remember it's like during the game I had texted it's like you're like, wow, okay, if Winfield like announced during the game or after the game that, hey, this is my last game, I'm going to the draft, like, okay, how would it'd be cool to get dad, right? Like if I can get his dad and talk about that. So it's like during the game, I'm sitting in the press box and I look up like who his dad's agent was when he played 15 years ago, you know? And I've got him in my phone. I text him and he's at the game with Winfield Sr., which is really cool. So again, I kind of had this separate track where I would have written Winfield off this game. And instead I wrote Tyler Johnson because Tyler Johnson had this amazing game where he goes off for 204 yards and 2 touchdowns. The touchdown that Tyler Johnson had at the end of the first half is like as nice a touchdown as you've seen all year, college, NFL, period. Just this amazing back of the end zone, one hand, toe tap. Like the announcers couldn't believe he was in. So I wrote Tyler Johnson. So like I knew Tyler Johnson really well. I had talked to Tyler, had talked to his coaches, his assistants, high school coaches, all this. So like in the draft process, you know, when you're talking about the depth at receiver and who they could get in the 4th round, who they could get that's like the 15th receiver in the class, but is still a stud, I kept mentioning Tyler Johnson. I'm like, here's this guy I know. You know, they traded out of the 4th round when they moved up and when they got Bronx, they didn't have a 4th round pick. And it was still like, I think Tyler Johnson could fall to them in the 5th round. And like I said, he did. So it was cool to get that right. It's total coincidence. It's just a blind squirrel kind of thing. But he's a really good receiver. He's a really good kid. He has a lot of the maturity and the vibes you get from Chris Godwin in terms of just a kid who's 22 but sounds like he's 28 and really sharp in terms of saying and doing the right things. I'm not saying he's going to have a Chris Godwin career arc where he's in the Pro Bowl in his 3rd year, but he's a really good receiver, and I think he'll do well for him.
Backtrack to what you were talking about earlier in regards to depth on the defensive line. I go back to this time last year when we were talking about Noah Spence potentially being, you know, with JPP's injury, potentially being our starting, you know, one of our starting ends or, you know, tackles or linebackers in this defense, rush linebackers. So I'm kind of anxious to see if they're able to pull a Shaq Barrett type or even somebody, you know, in the lower tier, you know, off the scrap heap, you know, a guy they bring in like maybe a Camp Body who shines in this Todd Bowles system because it's really a pass rush friendly system. And, you know, now we get the benefit of getting these tweeners that for years that didn't fit into the Tampa 2, you know, traditional 4-3 style of defense. And now we're able to find these guys like Shaq Barrett, you know, potentially. So, you know, we're going to miss Nassib's production, but I kind of knew early on, or we talked about early on, how I didn't think that they were going to be able to afford to re-sign him because he had good production in this system. You know, and then on the safety side of things, which you talked about earlier, I had read an article going into last season how Bowles covets safeties. Like he put at times you have 4 or 5 safeties on the field, you know, in dime, which is nuts. And so a guy like Winfield, who maybe fills that role they thought maybe Deon Buchanan was going to play last year, where he can play, you know, down in the box as a nickel or even play some linebacker or play safety. You know, I think he is that Swiss Army knife potentially that Bowles didn't have last season. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, like in talking, I got to talk to PJ Fleck, the Minnesota coach, who's had Winfield there. And it was neat. And then he said, literally, I mean, the guy tackles like a linebacker, okay? Once he gets the ball in his hands, he's like a receiver, and he can cover like a corner. So, I mean, they really like that versatility where you can line him up. If you want to go big nickel, he can be your 3rd safety and line up, cover a tight end, cover a slot receiver. You know, can use him at the line of scrimmage, can blitz him a lot, can drop him back in coverage, can let him play center field. The guy had a ton of picks this year just playing center field. And camping back and waiting for passes to come and just picking them off. So, again, I kind of think that if things go right, and we don't know what kind of training camp they're going to have, what kind of normal build-up to a season they're going to have, but, like, once they get settled, I would think he's one starting safety and Jordan Whitehead's probably the other. And they kind of use the two interchangeably. You had started talking about outside linebacker. I think they will get somebody. If you think about selling free agents on taking less to come to Tampa, I would just tell them the guy who was the number 3 pass rusher behind these two great pass rushers got $8 million a year as a free agent. So it's still a position where even if you're not a starter, even if you're sweating the guys ahead of you, you can do enough and make enough of the time you have to get paid and paid well. So maybe it's just a one-year thing. The brass ring, the best thing they could do is get Marcus Golden. I mean, that's somebody who played well for Bruce and for Bowles in Arizona, had a really good year with the Giants last year. For whatever reason, hasn't re-signed. Like Spot Track had him with like a $13 million a year market value, and he's still unsigned in mid-May. So again, if he is willing to take less, if he can do 1 year and $4 million or something, he would be money well spent. He would be a guy that is used to playing 80% of the snaps and would be ready to do that if either of those guys went down. And if all you do is ratchet both, it's like right now, let's say it's 85% of the defensive snaps for Barrett and for JPP. And if you say, look, guys, we're going to take you off the field more, we're going to have you both go 70%, and we're going to put, our number 3 in for that 30% that you're off the field, he's much better in those 30% of snaps than right now what you'd have with Anthony Nelson or one of these developmental guys or an undrafted rookie. They didn't even put a draft pick in a pass rusher. So I think for you to ignore the position in free agency and the draft, you would only do that if you had somebody in mind as a guy you can get cheap between now and the start of training camp.
Maybe a guy like that would want to come in, learn under Shaq Barrett, sign for like $1.1 million, like as a really low-paying internship, like Jameis Winston did in New Orleans, for the chance to play on this great team with Tom Brady, right?
Yeah, I mean, and the guys you're going to get in August aren't like young guys. You're going to get a guy who's 28 or 30, who's okay taking a smaller role. Again, and Brady makes it easier. Like if you've been in the league 8 years and you've won, 1 or 2 playoff games, maybe you take a little bit less to be part of a team. I mean, the Bucs have never had that working in their favor the way it does with Brady and with Gronk here, and that this is what everyone thinks is a playoff team. So if you get a call from Tom Brady, it's like, hey, man, we could use some help at pass rusher. I know you probably have more money, better offers elsewhere, but I really think you can help us win in the playoffs in Tampa. That carries a lot of weight. That might, even if it's somebody that hasn't played with Tom Brady, it's somebody that's been watching Tom Brady beat him for 10 years. That's a pretty compelling call. So like I said, I think they'll find somebody, whether it's a starter level player or just somebody who's more proven, to help them get some depth there at pass rusher.
Yeah, I mean, even if Tom makes that call and the player's still kind of on the fence, you can always call in Matt Gay. And Matt Gay making that call, the way that carries, I mean,
of course.
I don't imagine any player in the NFL, I don't care if they're a superstar or a guy struggling to make it, on the practice squad. If they get a call from Matt Gay, they're changing directions and they're coming to play with Matt Gay. Tom Brady's kind of like the added icing on the cake.
I saw Matt Gay yesterday. It's funny. It's like I've had so little interaction. Matt Gay lives in my neighborhood, which is really cool. And he's been in Utah hanging out there. That's where home is for him. That's where his wife's family is. So he's been out there. And I hadn't seen him at all. And I'm walking with my kids to the Dunkin' Donuts yesterday morning, the main drag coming out of our neighborhood. And he kind of pulled by and did the whole wave as he goes by. And I turned around and sure enough, it's Utah plates. So Matt Gay is back in town. I can say that.
Oh, man. That's good news. That's good news. Yes. And you being that, I mean, you have Matt Gay in your neighborhood and you have yet to invite us to a cookout? I don't even
That's right. He came over. It was really cool. Last year, on Halloween. It was really cool. It's like there had been talk last year, like obviously he comes in whatever, August, September, and it's like, hey man, I heard Matt Gay, I think that's his house. So it was cool. Like you go trick or treating. It's like the only real window you have to knock on somebody's door and not be a complete stalker. So yeah, I knocked on the door with my kids. I'm like, hey man, and we know each other from the Bucs. So it was cool to have that. And he did, it was really cool. He came over Halloween night at 10 o'clock when most of the kids are done. And he played just a pickup football game, 8-on-8 football with the kids, and was all-time quarterback. It was really cool. So yeah, he's like I said, he's busy guy right now, but he's been a fun neighbor to have for sure.
Did he give out full-size Snickers though?
He did. And
I knew
trust
it.
me, again,
I knew it.
there's no better, like you can be like the worst neighbor in the world, but if you give out full-size candy bars at Halloween,
Yep.
it's like, I'm going to let it go. Like, I don't care if your dog craps on my yard and doesn't get cleaned up afterwards. I'm like, yeah, but full-size
Snickers. Full-size
like,
Snickers.
So,
That's
so
a
the
big
legend,
thing.
the legend grows. I mean,
Right.
what a fucking guy, dude! What a fucking guy! This is unbelievable.
I agree.
And-
Good neighbor.
Yeah, oh my god, dude! So I mean, I know where I'm taking my kids trick or treating now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I'm not going to say what neighbor. I won't
at
say what
least for the
neighbor
next
it is,
20
but
years.
I'll message you if you need it.
Oh, dude,
Hey,
I mean, I could call Matt up if I wanted to, but I've been giving him some privacy because it's the off season, and I know he's been in Utah, so But yeah, we're huge Matt Gay fans on this.
Oh,
show.
we are the biggest.
So, yeah, this is basically unofficial official fan club for Matt.
Hey, Greg.
Gay.
Greg, couple more questions.
Yeah.
Do you think that Trevor Sikkema moving out of Tampa is what's brought all this great luck to our team? I'm Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski. Is there anything to that? Are you thinking about writing an article about that?
Yeah, I mean, like Brady didn't mention him by name. Gronk didn't say anything by name, just because they're probably more class acts than to say Trevor's gone now. It's cool to come to Tampa. I mean, I think that's implied. It's understood.
That's what I was thinking.
Because he's still kind of lingering. He's still, we'll talk about the Bucs and stuff, but he's not physically here in Tampa, and that's the most important thing, I would say.
There wasn't room in the city for two people like that. So Sikkema out, Brady in. It only makes sense.
Yeah,
I mean, Greg and Trevor are here, though. I mean, that's kind of like a Tom and a Peyton Manning type of scenario, right?
It's true. I agree.
Last question for Greg. I know
sure.
Probably kept you a little bit longer than you wanted to hang out.
That's all right.
The Bucs schedule came out recently. You have? There's basically two questions here. What do you think the final record is? I mean, obviously it's super early to kind of throw that type of dart, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think the Bucs record ends up being? And is there a game on that calendar that you immediately circled once that schedule came out?
Yeah, it's like we had to the Athletic asked, as part of what we do with the schedules last Thursday, feels like it's been longer than that, but Thursday night we had to do like an actual record prediction. And it gets hard when you have to do that because it's like you look through and you'll try and go through and count wins and count losses and say, well, maybe they split these two, maybe they do that. So the easy answer, I had 10-6, and honestly, that's probably on the conservative side right now. That's over what Vegas would say is the over/under for this team. If they're 10-6, they're probably not winning the division. To be honest, that's still probably the Saints winning the South. But I think that first game, you talk about games to circle, that first game is huge. To have that right there, game one, it's almost more intriguing if there's this model where the world isn't quite ready for the NFL on September 10th. And it's like weeks 3 and 4 can get stripped out of the schedule completely, and there's no division games. Every team loses one home and one away. And then week 2 is set up in such a way where all the week 2 games can get slid into everybody's bye weeks, and it just fits in without actually taking up a week. So what they could do, again, I'm hoping it's just very normal, everything goes to plan. But again, if the world isn't ready for football, even with empty stadiums on September 10th, you take week 1 and switch that over to week 18, which is like January 10th. And then what that lets you do is now you start the season in week 5, you get another month, and you still get to play a 14-game season. The Super Bowl is still played the same date. But what that does is it suddenly makes the final game of the season Bucs at Saints, which could be huge. I mean, right now they end with like the Falcons at home, which, I mean, it could be something, might be nothing at all. But for me, the Saints games are the ones that are the biggest difference. If you look at Breeze and Brady and their careers, they're great quarterbacks, but they're much better at home in the playoffs. Tom Brady, I think, is 20-4 at home in the playoffs. And I think he's like 4-5 on the road in the playoffs. And that's not to take away from what he's done. It's just part of what makes him good is being at home and earning that right to have the home field advantage and make opponents come to him in the playoffs. So I just think that's a huge thing between Breeze and Brady is one of them is going to be home in the playoffs and the other is going to be on the road. And those 2 Bucs Saints games will go a long way to deciding which is which.
Yeah, to have the Bucs force everyone to come to Tampa and have the Super Bowl in Tampa.
Right.
And I had them at 14-2, just so you know. And just,
what were the two losses?
Say, I told you so.
What are the two losses?
I think I gave them a loss in Denver just because of the altitude.
Right.
And then the other one, I think I just had a feeling that they would lose to Gruden in Vegas. That's all.
Could be. Right.
The first time Gruden has faced Tom since the Tuck Rule game, and it'll be the first time that Gruden's faced the Bucs since they fired him. So
you have us going undefeated in the South then?
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. I don't see them losing.
See, we're always going to drop a dumb game to like Carolina. It'll be Carolina.
This is not the same
We're not
team.
Supposed to win or lose to them, but it'll be that we're going to lose to them. Bridgewater will come in and throw
this
7
is not
touchdowns.
The same team. Tom Brady brings everybody's accountability up 35-40%. Okay. We've already and like I said, the kickers who play with Tom historically are ridiculously talented.
Hall of Famers.
They pull through. They're Hall of Famers. Matt Gay is going to win us at least 6 games.
I agree.
And that's not even because we needed him to win the game. It's just Tom, helping put his guys up on pedestals, because that's what Tom does. He's probably the opposite of Jordan as it relates to that, whereas Jordan's, trying to pull you along with him and not really elevate you above him. But Tom's okay with that. And that's what makes Tom so great. And, Matt Gay's the same way. So we're going to see how that plays out. That's going to be a weird dynamic in the locker room. I'm most excited about that, to be honest. But, Greg, so happy you got to hang out with us, dude. It was super informative. And knowing that you're a fucking neighbor to Matt Gay on this podcast, that's ridiculous, dude. That's so awesome.
It's like the same subdivision. It's not like he's next door. I'm not borrowing a cup of sugar from Matt Gay here, but same neighborhood.
Not yet. Not yet.
Right.
But
you send Riley over there to pick up a cup of sugar?
He knows where the house is.
That's awesome. So let everybody know where they can read your work and how they can follow you on Twitter. We'll have your handle up obviously on the lower third, but just let people know where they can follow you and keep up to date with all the stuff that you do, because I legitimately look forward to having your tweets show up on my timeline, your articles. You're an awesome follow as it relates to Bucs media.
No, thanks. Everything I write is at The Athletic. It's theathletic.com. It is a subscription site, but there's a ton of great content. We got 60 NFL writers, 300 writers total. So don't do it just for me. Do it for every team you like, and having a writer that knows their team really well. I think right now, if you try and sign up, they'll give you half off, which is $30 for an entire year, which is a really good deal. Theathletic.com. And I'm on Twitter. It's just my name, just GregAuman. Hit me up there. I'm tweeting all the time.
Yeah. I mean, you're the only person I trust on Twitter. That's it. Greg Auman, and then nobody else.
What about
me? Thank you, man. I appreciate
that. I definitely don't trust. I mean, people don't come to us for breaking news. It's Greg Auman. They don't trust us. We're not real media. It's Greg and everybody else.
I broke the news on the uniforms, but whatever.
Man. Yeah, well, that's true.
Uniforms, man. It's silly for me to talk to you for an hour and not get your take on uniforms and what you like and what you don't like and what do you think. What's your favorite thing about the new Bucs uniforms?
The favorite thing? Oh, it's the pewter, the all pewter. I've been banging all pewter for I don't know, since the new uniforms came out. I was like, why don't we have an all pewter? Why don't we have an all pewter? It's by far my favorite thing. The second one is in the details. The pirate ship being on the sleeves, but going into black. So it looks more like the old school one, but with the new school drawing of it. Love it. It was that right there is such a cool little, I don't know if people even noticed it at first, but it was one of the coolest things that they added to it. It's red on the pewter one, but it just looks so sharp on those red uniforms. They could have gotten a little more flashy with the uniforms themselves, maybe brought it a little bit more forward into the future, but I totally understand what they did, and they look good, and they'll continue to look good. So, and obviously the jersey sales haven't suffered. So I think they did the right thing for now. We'll see if it doesn't change in 5 years though, because I think it will.
Right. Oh yeah. I think right now nobody's wearing them. Once you see them out in public, I think it'll really change things too, is have people actually out wearing them in stores, wearing them in restaurants, wearing them at games, obviously.
I wear one to bed every night. It's just, but I've been doing that for 13, 14 years.
My youngest son had it's like when Matt Gay drove by, it's not like we wear, and my kids wear Buck stuff all the time or anything, but my youngest has like a Mike Evans jersey. I was trying to think long term because like he's only 9 years old, so you want to get like I want a jersey that the Bucks are going to have for a long time. So last year, like last home game, I'm like all smart, like, oh, this is great. This is gonna be a jersey that's gonna look good. So I got him a Devin White jersey, thinking like, all right, rookie contract, at least 4 years, you're gonna be wearing this jersey. He's gonna
Good
be making
investment.
plays. Not thinking like, or maybe they get complete new uniforms and you just look like somebody with a cheap dad for the next 4 years. But Riley, my youngest Wes, had his Mike Evans jersey on when Matt Gay drove past. So we had that, yeah.
What you need is obviously to get a Matt Gay jersey.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, get the custom right now for the Gay, but yeah, if you got the money to spend and get the custom jersey, go ahead and do it.
Dude, we are gonna have Matt Gay jerseys hanging up behind us. It's gonna happen, but I'm glad you got to hang out with us, dude. Look forward to having you on here again.
Yeah, this was fun.
And this was fun.